Alright, guys, we are live. So, this is our first show called the Final Summation. Basically, what I want to do with this channel is, kind of talk about anything and everything. Things like conspiracy theories, things, basically what's popular on the internet. It can be women, it can be conspiracy theories, it can be cars, auto, trucks, whatever. Basically, we're just here to kind of talk shit and go along. See what's going on here. See if I can educate you. Maybe you guys can educate me. Who the hell knows? But welcome to our broadcast today. So today, I figured I'd kick this channel off with some interesting topics. I think I really was interested in Klaus Schwab's address to Davos, as well as we have some other little tidbits going on here. We have Project Cedar, which is the central bank's CBDC coin that they're trying to roll out, as well as I want to talk about the impacts of SB9 for California, and then I also want to talk about the gas ban. Natural gas ban, basically a ban on natural gas stoves. And that the more I dig on that, the more I'm seeing it's not just one country or another. It seems like most of them are trying to go this route. And I think that this all ties back to the Great Reset with Klaus Schwab and, Davos Group and what we would call the elites. So, let's get on with this, and I want to kind of do a play-by-play as we go, and, take a look at this. Let's listen to what Klaus has to say and see if we can interpret what he's saying through this. So, hopefully there's audio. If not, I will figure this out as I go. I am very new to this streaming stuff, so here we go. Let's listen.
And Simonetta Sommaruga, President of the Swiss Confederation, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellencies, dear members and partners of the World Economic Forum, dear friends, a very cordial welcome to the annual meeting, the 50th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. We are celebrating the 50th birthday, but much more important is that we are celebrating 50 years of engagement for the stakeholder responsibility. As some of you may know, the forum was created after I wrote a book conceptualizing the stakeholder concept. At Davos, I envisaged creating a global village, encouraging interaction between all stakeholders of global society, from governments to business, from civil society to the young people.
So guys, what this is telling me is that they are trying to create an economic society that is not segmented as it used to be. You used to have America, Canada, Mexico, and every one of their economies would work very different. And you would have Europe, Germany, France, things like that, where everyone kind of operated independently in their economic regulation. However, now what's going on, it sounds like that at the Davos Group, one of the big things that they've been really working on is trying to bridge those gaps from being individual economies to being one global economy. When I hear, make a global village, it sounds like that you're hearing the ideas of very wealthy and influential people saying that they want to have control of the global mass instead of maybe the wealthy and elites in each individual country being able to only influence them. Now we're taking this on a global level. So this means now, you have countries like Uganda who are going to have to play in the same rules as America or Europe. And, we really don't know what the consequences of these things are going to be. But I think we can look at this and say, they're definitely trying to push globalism a lot more. And, globalism isn't good for everyone. It's usually only good for those at the top. So, let's continue this.
Looking around in this plenary hall, I'm proud of the community which we have created here over the years. And I'm grateful for your engagement, your loyalty, your will to make it happen. Business leaders here in the room have recognized that corporations are not just economic entities, but also social organisms. But we cannot be complacent. We must give the concept of stakeholder responsibilities meaning in real life. To do so, we will be unveiling 3 major initiatives this week. First, during our meeting here, we want to make substantial progress on a generally accepted framework to make stakeholder responsibility measurable and therefore also credible. The so-called ESG criteria on environmental, social and good governance performance must become an integral part of corporate auditing and reporting alongside the traditional profit and loss statement. Second.
So what does that mean, guys? Well, ESG is the environmental social governance plan. And what they want to do is what they've been talking about since, seems like Al Gore times, which was everyone has a carbon footprint. And what that means is that just by freaking existing, you are a burden on the environment. You are a burden on the globe. You are a burden on Earth, basically. So what they want to do is they are trying to, I believe, kind of conflate a couple different terminologies here by saying shareholder. I think that they're intending that to be the individual person, or maybe it's the individual corporation. Or country. We don't know. But from what I'm hearing and what I'm reading is that they want to create, if you guys are familiar with profit and loss, it's basically what it is that it's just a balance sheet. It's a very basic balance sheet. It just says, okay, well, we put expenses in this, the company made this, and when you subtract all that, you have profit over here. So I think what they're trying to do is that they're trying to say that they're going to take all of the individual decisions of individuals, and they're going to make a profit and loss statement based on that, which would be good versus bad, essentially, and say, well, you use too much energy, or you use too much carbon, or you're too much of a burden on the atmosphere, so we're going to limit you. Like a business would be limited on its profit margins. If it has low profit margins and it's not making money, then that company is therefore limited in its expansion and its ability to conduct business, whether it's small-time business or big-time business. It just kind of affects the scaling aspect, and you can see a lot of businesses kind of crab along, and that's how they're kind of looking at the individual person, which is, they want people to be numbers. And in a society where we have told everyone that each individual person means so much, I think that it was all just kind of social programming into this. Because what we see with this is that each person now, all 8 billion of us, are going to be watched. I mean, look at how China's social credit system works. Very similar to this. This is just on a global scale. where your internet traffic is monitored, your routines are monitored, your daily habits are monitored, what you consume is monitored, what you do is monitored, where you work is monitored, how much you get paid is monitored. Basically, every aspect of a person's life is now being monitored and being critiqued by those with the authority to deem yes, it's good, or no, it's bad. And that's a really scary spot to be in my opinion, because as someone who's kind of seen this roll out, the last 20 years, and then doing my research and just reading about history and how all this has kind of come together, it's what's really funny to me is I was a fan of Alex Jones way back in the day, when he first started, and probably up to like the last 5-10 years or so. And what was really scary to me was, back when Alex was talking about this was such a taboo kind of topic to talk about. No one wanted to address it. Everyone said, oh, you're crazy, this and that. And now we're looking at this come to pass. They're talking about it at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And this is just from 2020. This was 2 years ago, 3 years ago almost now. And we hear these things, and, I don't know if lately you guys have been paying attention, but they've been talking about the ESG score a lot more. It's becoming more and more frequent in their discussions. So they are pushing these plans forward. And I think what it ultimately is for is control. They want to control the individual person. They want to control the individual company. And they want to control basically all the resources of the world to say, okay, you get this, you get that. Or you get 2 of these, you get none of these because you didn't do your work or it wasn't satisfactory. So, in those dystopic kind of movies where we see these things playing out and we say, oh, well, this can never happen to us. Here it is. It is happening right in front of us. And so, shit, guys, get it on. Start paying attention to this stuff, because whether it affects you or not, this may affect your children or your grandchildren. And the last thing we want is to be rolling in our graves thinking, well, is this what's happening to our society? Is this what our children are going to go through? Is this what our grandchildren are going to go through? And I just don't see this turning around, because I don't think enough people can take action. So let's continue on here and see what we got.
We want to show how business is walking the talk, presenting over 160 so-called lighthouse projects of our partners. They demonstrate how our partners are using their knowledge and resources to help to address societal issues. The world is in a state of emergency, and the window to act is closing. We do not want to face continued political and economic disintegration. We do not want to reach the tipping point of irreversibility of climate change. And we do not want to leave behind to the next generations an ever more hostile and ever less habitable world. Just think of the wildfires in Australia. So what should we do? First, the basic concept of the World Economic Forum is that all those challenges are so great that they cannot be addressed by one government, by one business, by one organization alone. We need a global platform for collaborative action. Over the last 50 years, the World Economic Forum has become a comprehensive platform for public-private cooperation.
I just gotta stop it right there. See, right there, he just told you that they are trying to build a global economic, basically a global economic group that has the power to tell every country in the world what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what changes they need to make. And if you're in a third world country, this won't. It'll impact you because there's dynamics to this that will affect the third world countries. But you know who this affects most? This affects America and Europe and all of the other Western countries who are under a more republic or democratic style governance system. And what this effectively does, I think, is like in America, it really is starting to sound like that they are going to subvert the laws of our nation. They're going to allow another power to make regulation and enforce regulation, and you know, as they would say in Game of Thrones, bend the knee. You know, they want every country to bend the knee to these guys, and I don't see survival out of this. I see very dystopic outcomes for this. Now, I may be wrong, you know, but the problem is that I've seen this coming for so long, and the more I watch it, the more it seems to be coming to pass. So be aware of these things. Start looking at how these things are going to affect your life and how they're going to affect your children, your grandchildren, things like that. So let's continue.
Reinforced last year through a strategic cooperation framework agreement with the United Nations. One of the initiatives which we will inaugurate this week is Uplink. It is an open source digital platform that will allow all people with innovative ideas, with expertise and resources to engage behind the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we will start with oceans. Second, we want here to listen to the young and to diverse voices. The diverse spirit means to accept and to respect different voices and to jointly look for solutions, not through polarization, but through a genuine exchange of dialogue and understanding. Every voice to be heard here in this hall has to be respected. Third,
every voice in this hall has to be respected. Well, that would work if it was, you know, more than just like 200-300 people out of 8 billion who also have the world's highest influence. Maybe it's money, maybe it's something else. You know, basically we're talking about people who have more means than even the wealthy. I mean, these are like the ultra wealthy. These are the people who are influencing our governments, influencing our policy. And, you know, what's funny is that America is very capitalistic, and this is essentially the dark side of capitalism, which is, you know, if you have the money beyond what most people have, and I'm saying even like, you know, we're talking tens of billions of dollars here, you know, if not trillions worth of market capital in that room, in this symposium. And when you take that and all this money is combined within, you know, a few hundred people versus what's out there in the world, you know, of the remaining 8 billion, you start to see where the money and influence is. And what's the old phrase in America when you're looking at corruption or disservice from companies? Maybe it's, you know, let's look at the Sam Bankman-Friedman thing with FTX. I mean, follow the money. And the problem is we do live in a too long didn't read generation, and no one reads, no one listens anymore, no one does their research, no one says, oh shit, these guys mean business. They're over here in Switzerland having a meeting, and it barely gets a blip on the news. It doesn't even make local news. Local news doesn't even talk about this. So if you're in fucking Wichita, Kansas, and you're just flipping on Fox or CNN, this is not what they're talking about. And if they talk about it, it's only for like 2 minutes, if that. And then it's off to the rest of the show. Whereas these things, I think, in my opinion, these are some of the most important topics that we need to be talking about, because this is what we're trying to shape the world into. This is not our grandparents' generation anymore. This is not the World War II or Vietnam generation anymore. This is now, we've gotten so soft that we are now regulating people and how they behave for the benefit of the environment. And the fact is, we can go through all these different studies, all these different research papers, and see that even the Industrial Revolution didn't put out the amount of pollutants and toxins that they're saying we do now. And to say like CO2 is harmful, God, that's a fucking joke. If anyone can actually do some research or even a little bit of reading, I remember as a kid they were telling us, well, shit, trees and plants, anything green needs CO2. And what do we find is that the more we deforest, which we understand is a negative impact on the environment, but at the same time, if we're replanting trees and we're trying to build these places back up again, we need CO2 for them to thrive. If we don't have that, then these plants and trees and all these other living creatures cannot survive. Not to mention, CO2 makes up part of our atmosphere as far as what we can breathe. And CO2 is not nearly as toxic as CO, which is only a single atom molecule of carbon. It's a single oxygen atom with a carbon atom. And because we are carbon based, that's why CO is so bad for us versus CO2, two oxygen molecules with a single carbon. It helps wash it out, and now it becomes beneficial for us. So when we look at these things, we need to really have our wits about us. We can't just sit here and listen to a guy in a fucking suit at the World Economic Forum who wants us to eat bugs and say, yeah, he's right, this guy knows everything. I don't think he does, and I don't think the people around him do, and I don't think that they're coming from a position that they want to help us. They're coming from a position of they want power. They want everyone under their control, and it's not because necessarily they have a power flex or anything. It's because if you can regulate the people, okay, of the globe, and you can restrict what they can and can't do, then what that means is that it's more resource for them. You know, here's a very dystopic view. Think about this, if this gets to a dystopic point that we expect it to here at some point, we're going to be sitting here, you and me, regular people, we're going to be on a caloric diet that the government says is okay, while this guy is having steak, hamburgers, and, crab. Basically, he's going to be able to live in a life of luxury, while we're sitting here having to restrict what we can do, restrict our movements, restrict our eating habits, restrict just what we do. Now, do I think 75% of America is overweight and fat? Yeah. Even I got a couple extra pounds, but, when most of these people are deemed clinically obese, shit, man. I mean, I kind of get why they're doing it. But I think that these things are also more, they more apply to, I think, the Western nations who have lived in gluttony because it's been so soft. So when it comes to these things, we all need to be kind of aware and say, is this right? Is this what we need to base our future on? Is this what we need to be planning for? And I think what Klaus is saying here, and I got some other stuff I'm going to show you guys, I think we need to be worried now. I think we need to start really looking at this and stop kicking the can down the road and actually address these things. So let's listen to what else he has to say.
And most importantly, the annual meeting will be a do-show, not a talk show. Most events taking place here have been prepared by task forces ahead of time to ensure tangible progress can be made this week. Allow me to give you some examples. The best way to foster a more cohesive and inclusive society, that's our theme, is to provide everybody with a decent job and income. Therefore,
what does that mean? A decent job and income. Okay, so we've been hearing about UBI for a while, the Universal Basic Income, and what the fuck is a decent job, guys? I mean, honestly, let's have that discussion, because a decent job, I have a decent job. I'm a contractor by trade. But what are we talking about? Are we talking about a state employee, a government employee? Are we talking about, hey, go farm the field and we're going to pay you in shekels kind of thing? I mean, that is very dangerous language, I think, because they're making it seem like that most people in the globe don't have a job, and they're making it sound like most people in the globe don't make any money, when this world, whether you're in a third world nation, a second world nation, or a first world nation, it all runs on jobs and income. Everyone needs to make it. Now, do a lot of folks not make a great income in the third world countries? Yeah, we understand that. But that's not addressing this. This is speaking in a blanket style fashion where he's saying, we need to provide everyone with income. Okay, well then let's look at the homelessness in America and say, is this what they're wanting? Is this what the homeless want? No, they want money to go buy their drugs and alcohol without having any responsibility. That's the point. So now you're going to put homeless into like labor camps? Are you going to put everyone into kind of forced labor or re-education, and then say you're going to be good on $200 a month? Gosh, who knows where this is going?
We create here in Davos a public-private platform to provide 1 billion people with the skills needed for the age of the fourth industrial revolution. As far as more sustainable world is concerned, this meeting will serve to make green investment mainstream and over time imperative. It will ensure the engagement of our partners and members to become carbon neutral. And finally, in addition to the commitment to reduce carbon emissions, the restoration of our ecosystem is a priority for the coming decade. To that end, we will launch a public-private platform for reforestation and restoration. The aim will be to grow, restore and conserve 1 billion trees, 1 trillion trees by 2030. I'm delighted to see that many governments and companies are keen to engage, as well as the Saudi Arabian G20 presidencies, for whom safeguarding the planet is the name.
So they're doing this all with the guise of saying that, hey, we're going to come up with investments. The funny thing is they said that, green investments were going to come more mainstream. And what's funny is that that's what carbon credits started off as way back when. Green investments have been very prominent, very mainstream for a long time. And I guess that really depends on what sector you're in and what exposure you get to these things. But what's also interesting is that he's saying that, oh, hey, well, we're going to have an initiative where we plant 1 billion or 1 trillion trees. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. We want to rebuild our environment. Yes, we want to make our environment more habitable. But planting trees is not that. You know, when you look at California, and California has had some of the worst wildfires in the country, let alone the globe, and in recent years. And most people think, oh, you know, it's just a forest burning, it's natural, this and that. And to an extent, yes, it is. However, what most people kind of gloss over is the fact that they stopped deforestation practices, which let's look at kind of ground thinning operations, which did not cut the trees. It's not like they sent logging companies out into California forestry and said log all the trees. No, their whole goal was let's preserve the trees, let's preserve the forest, and the way we do that were techniques that were found about 100 years ago, which is burn the brush, pick out the brush, let's kill all the dead shit, get it out, remove the ground fuel around the living trees, the living plants. So then what happened was is that for many, many, many years in California and surrounding areas is that we didn't have these forest fires. We didn't have these issues. And the reason why was because we were actually conservationists at heart. This is not talking conservation. This is talking, hey, we're going to do this over here so you guys don't see the bullshit we're doing over here that's actually going to hurt you. They wanted people to feel good by saying, oh, well, you know, we're going to come up with this green initiative. We're going to plant 1 billion trees, kind of add back to the environment and try and make it green and lush again. While at the same time that they're going to institute carbon credits and saying that you can't move without it costing you.
Those are the kinds of initiatives which will spark a lasting legacy of our special anniversary year. Please engage. Dear participants, when we look around the world, we can't deny that there is a general loss of trust and confidence of people. It is coupled with a profound pessimism and cynicism. But we cannot be paralyzed by those feelings. Just the opposite. They must drive us to action. Change doesn't come by itself. We, as global stakeholders, have a responsibility to drive it, and to drive it in a positive direction. So here at Davos, we have to start with the premise that each of us can help to create a better world, whether we are business leaders, government leaders, NGO leaders, scientists, young people, or cultural leaders. We cannot only create a better world, we must create a better world. Look around here in this room. There's so much transformational power gathered here. If we aggregate our goodwill and action, we can say to the next generation, you can rely on us. Ladies and gentlemen, I have now the great pleasure and honor to introduce Simonetta.
Alright, that seems to be the end of him. So let's get out of that. And now we have a good baseline, I think, as to what's really going on. We have a good idea to say, okay, this is what the people with all this money are gearing towards. This is what they're investing in. This is what they're pushing for the future. Now, let's look at this. And this is fair use. It's CBS. I don't think I'm stepping on any toes using this. This is a 4-minute video, and I think that it's kind of surprising to see all this kind of stuff happening together. And I've got some other things that I'll talk about at the end of this in relation to this next topic that, most people aren't aware of. And the way that the governments and the local municipalities are handling these things is a bit scary, overall. So let's hear this.
When you turn on the stove to make a meal, you probably aren't thinking about climate change. But major cities across the country are passing bans on gas stoves and other appliances that run on natural gas because of their planet-warming emissions. It's a big deal because nearly 187 million Americans use natural gas in their homes. Senior national and environmental correspondent Ben Tracy tells us why the fight to save the planet could be coming to a kitchen near you.
At Darrow's New Orleans Grill in Carson, California,
You got your fresh catfish fried.
you can count on a warm welcome,
This is what you've been waiting for all week.
a hot fryer, and that signature blue flame burning on the stovetop.
We've always used gas. All these recipes are gas related.
Norwood Clark Jr. has been cooking with gas for decades. He's worried that a growing number of bans on gas appliances in California could impact his plans to open a new restaurant near Los Angeles' football stadium.
This is going to put a major wrench in those plans. When you change the cooking style, you change the makeup of the product itself. I can't see any legitimate chef out there turning to electric. I don't see it.
Really?
I don't see it, Ben.
About 80 local governments have passed laws requiring or encouraging new homes and businesses to use electric rather than natural gas appliances. Burning natural gas in these settings accounts for about 13%.
Guys, this is legitimate. Listen to this. I mean, you have all these municipalities in more liberal states like California, New York, and some of these other areas where they are passing these initiatives on a local level to ban resources like natural gas. Let's look at Sacramento City. Sacramento City, I don't know if any of you guys are from around there or know the area or whatever, but in California, they passed a local ordinance, gosh, it was like a year or two ago. I think it was last year it went into effect, which was in the city limits, you are no longer allowed to install a gas heating appliance. So, like, for instance, furnaces, right? This is where it affects my business and it affects me because I have to kind of gear towards these things. Sacramento City said that if you have your furnace replaced, well, you cannot replace it with another gas-fired appliance. You have to install electric, which means that it has to be converted to a heat pump, which are less efficient. They have lower capacities for heating and cooling, and what we find is that they are very limited in temperature, more or less cold in extremes than a traditional furnace would be. And the irony of all this, and the big running joke, is that they can't even keep the lights on in California enough to, make this worthwhile. So while they're banning natural gas being used in homes, we have whole developments now, whole tract developments in California that are all electric. You're required to have a solar system on the house. You can't have a gas appliance stove. You can't have a gas-fired furnace. No fireplaces, no pellet stoves, no, inserts. If you have a fireplace insert, it's fake, kind of thing. They do not want people to use any sort of combustible in their home. And to me, when I live in America, I don't think, wow, they control us to a point that I can't even use a gas stove, But that's what's going on. So while they're pushing this gas stove ban, and I think that the gas stove ban really kind of perked a lot of people up, because most people, they got to cook, they got to make shit, they got to eat, and heating their home, most people, let's be real, they don't even know what a furnace is in their house. They don't know if they even have a furnace. They just know that the shit heats and cools, right? Well, this, I think, is going to get their attention. And that's why I think now it's becoming a hubbub, because now it's going to affect the daily lives of every individual in these cities. And so when we see things like this, and we all hear about how California can't keep the lights on, and they do rolling blackouts, and they haven't revamped the grid to be able to handle these things, and they want high density housing, they want all these different aspects, that quite frankly what it does is that it gets people used to not having the luxuries that they had before. You know, I personally think that that's what this is all about. And this goes back to the Great Reset. This goes to, they want people in this world to, be used to and okay with less. So let's let it continue. We've only got a couple more minutes.
And of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, the largest component of it is methane, which is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide at warming the planet.
So there's actually not that much about natural gas that's natural.
Leah Guccione is with RMI, a Colorado-based clean energy organization. She knows the fight over gas stoves has become a flashpoint. 20 states have passed laws prohibiting bans on gas appliances, arguing that by itself, cooking with natural gas in homes amounts to just 0.1% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. There are going to be a lot of people who don't like this. They like their gas stove. Do you worry about turning some people off to the larger climate issues that we're trying to combat as a society for something that is relatively small?
I think that's a valid concern. Really what we need to think about is eliminating all of the fossil gas appliances from our home. So not just the stove, but also our furnaces, our water heaters.
There it is.
We have a gas-powered dryer. The climate science is showing us that we have almost no time to waste.
At this Denver home, researchers from Stanford...
Boy, it really sounds like that what they're trying to do is say, you have all these pious people like the gal you just saw there. We need to do this. We need to get people off of all these things. You can't have a gas dryer. You can't have a gas furnace. Can't have a stove, cooktop. You just can't have gas anything anymore. And I would almost go and say that eventually here, probably in the near future, things like charcoal and smoking for barbecues and shit, that's going to go away, because they're going to say that it's too much of a burden on this society.
Are studying the impacts. They say gas stoves produce planet-warming pollution equal to 500,000 gas-powered cars each week. Natural gas can also raise levels of nitrogen dioxide in homes, potentially causing respiratory issues, including asthma. When you guys went in there and turned on the burners, how quickly did that reach a limit that's considered unhealthy?
It took about 6 minutes for the nitrogen dioxide level to reach that EPA threshold. These pollutants really do have negative effects on our health.
Natural gas is safe. It's a
And see, that's the whole thing, is that they want to make tools to make measurements and then tell us that these measurements are now the new standard, which I get it. With science and with engineering, we tend to refine our measurements and refine our ways of being critical about things or evaluating things. I get that. Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm seeing is that they want to take however many history years that we have, hundreds of years, thousands of years of cooking with wood inside our homes, heating our buildings with wood, using gas. They were using things like oil and tar in the medieval days, which are all byproducts of fossil fuel. And I tell you, tar burns a hell of a lot dirtier than natural gas. And they would burn tar in their homes, as for heating or cooking or whatever it was. They'd use it as fire starter. They'd use it, to get rid of excrement if they needed, because there wasn't plumbing back then. So when we see all this, we got to start really we got to stop drinking their Kool-Aid. Their Kool-Aid is they want us to believe whatever they say just because they have a sound of authority. And that's bullshit. So let's continue.
Affordable, it's clean.
The Natural Gas Association disagrees with Stanford's findings. It says it's working to reduce emissions and that most consumers simply can't afford thousands of dollars to switch to electric appliances.
Yeah, not to mention the cost that's
this is
going to
a
be
very
associated with it.
expensive proposition for very little environmental gain.
What can I get for you, man?
Norwood Clark Jr. says he cares about climate change, but if he's ever forced to replace his gas stove,
I'll shut it down. Because I'm not going to compromise the flavor.
You close your business.
I'll close it down.
And I don't blame
I
them.
really would.
and that's why the debate over those little blue flames is so hot.
That chicken is amazing.
I mean, let's take heating and air, right? You know, you're going to have a lot of contractors out there that do not want to install heat pump exclusively. And primarily because the technology isn't there. They can't guarantee it. And then on top of that, what's going to end up happening is we have to add such high electric heat that now with these customers, you know, here's one thing that they didn't realize, or that most people on average don't think about, which is, you know, let's look at the utility rates, right? Well, when you're in summer, they typically spike the electrical rates because people are dependent on electricity for air conditioning and things like that, right? Fans, you know, so on. Whereas in wintertime, they usually spike the natural gas and propane rates because people are using it for heating, and they'll drop back the electrical rate. Well, now what's going to end up happening is that now that they're having everyone be so reliant on just one utility, which would be electricity, now that spike that was only in summer is now going to be year-round. And what that's going to mean is that the average household will probably see a cost increase of anywhere from 100 to 200% on their electric bill because they can do it. And when these utility companies have contracts with these local municipalities like governments, well, what happens is that it creates a monopoly now. Because, you know, someone like me or maybe someone like you, we may not have the resource to go start up a power generation facility and say, hey, we want to offer this service to our customers. You know, let us in to the regulatory group for utility companies. But instead what's going to happen is that they're going to say, oh, well, you know, in California you have, quite honestly, you only had like 5 utilities in the whole state for a long time. What's happened now in the recent years is that, like, for instance, because PG&E got fucking sued to the dirt pretty much because of all the forest fires they were starting with their infrastructure, they said, hey, we're not going to generate power anymore. We are now going to start selling these plants to smaller corporations who can handle that and maintain these plants while we now focus on the transmission wire and deal with that. And that has improved the safety orientation and how the grid is maintained. However, the grid is still far under repair. It's in such disrepair that, you know, we forget about stories like the San Bruno gas explosion or Paradise Fire or all these different issues that have happened. And this is what happens. These are the things that happen when you have a monopoly with utility companies, because now it's not about safety and the regulation for them as much as it is, well, they're generating profits. They generate profits for the politicians. They have lobby guys. So then our politicians get paid even more. The state takes the kickback. Well, all at the same time, now you have the utility companies telling the state how to make regulation, how it should be done, so on and so forth. So now they're playing together to screw the common people. And I don't see this playing out well. But unfortunately, I think this is going to continue to happen, even though we have stories like this that are trying to warn people, don't do it. I completely get why this guy would go away if they're going to force him to go electric, because, you know, we've built these crafts. We've developed these skills based on the resources that we've had up until this point. And, you know, for him, he says that, you know, electric stove does not produce the same flavor and quality that natural gas does. And I tend to believe him because I look at heating. You know, natural gas is a far superior heating tool than heat pumps and electric heat. They just are, you know. Even though they say electric is 100% efficient, that's cool. But now we're not looking at the ROI on that electricity. We're not looking at the return on the investment. So if I'm going to have an electric bill of $500 a month and I have to keep my place at, say, 68 to have that, I'm not really, I mean, it's comfortable, but it's still a little cool. I mean, I run a little cold personally, so that means I'm going to be walking around with a sweatshirt all the time. I can't heat my house to a temperature with a heat pump that is going to be sustainable and comfortable and affordable. You know, what are we going to do? You know, it's just more bullshit.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Ben Tracy in Los Angeles.
He sounded pretty serious, guys. He said he would close it down. Now, you all know I don't cook, but chefs have told me that you can cook better with gas.
Cook.
I do not know.
Most women don't anymore. So now, let's, oh God, there it is. Let's take a look at this next video I got. I want to bring this up because I think this is just another add-on to what's going on. So let me cue this up a bit better. Okay. Alright. So here we have California Insider, and they're talking about the impacts of SB9 and SB10 in California, which these affect building regulations in the state. And what they've done is that they have passed these two bills. SB10 I'm still not completely familiar with. I haven't really done much research on it. But SB9, what they've done is that in the wording of how they passed the bill, and no one's talking about this right now, and it's really fucking frustrating because I'm watching all these videos online and no one's actually addressing it. But what they said in the bill, which I'll have to look and pull up the actual text of it, but basically what they've said is they are now not going to zone land for building single-family homes anymore. They want to remove that zoning aspect. So when you have, let's say you have a town. This is how zoning works, right? So you have a town, and in that town you have what they call commercial zoning, industrial zoning, agriculture zoning, and residential zoning. And in residential, they can break it down to high density apartments, multifamily, things like townhouses and shit, and single family home. So what these guys are going to talk about is only one side of it, and they do not address the aspect of the text that I think is really important in all this, which is they are now going to stop zoning land for residential use, which means that the typical suburb that you were used to, right, where, you know, you're just outside of city limits but you have a nice housing tract, or you would have an HOA development where, you know, things are a little bit more refined. That way you don't have just everyone in the general public getting in. You know, they have rules and regulations and such. Well, what's going to happen is that we have all this. They had this in place. They have been trying to push California to high density housing anyways. And we're going to really start seeing this. So I'm going to let this video play for a moment. This is from California Insider. And what they are going to do is that it's the mayor of Costa Mesa, and it looks like one of the reporters from the Epic Times. And they're going to go through and kind of talk about the nice face of these bills and what they're looking for it to do. Because what they've done is that they've passed regulation that stops the zoning for new residential zoning, but while at the same time they are encouraging property owners of single family homes and lots to now subdivide their lots, build on ADUs, and then sell those ADUs or those apartments separately from the main dwelling home. So basically, say you had a property, right? Your house is at the street, and say you build some granny flats in the back, right? Well, now what they're saying is that you can basically subdivide your lot between the two dwelling units, so between your main house and your ADU, and now you can sell that ADU as its own property. Now, what this is going to do is that this is going to push more of the first-time home buyers out. This is going to push a lot of the lower-income home buyers out, and even middle class, I think. Middle class won't be able to touch this shit no more. And I think what's going to happen is that it's going to encourage a lot of the big investors to come in and buy these properties, subdivide these lots, because now they can double their profit, build these ADUs and condos on in the backyard, and sell them. And I don't think they really give a shit about space or anything else, because the idea is that they're saying, oh, well, the homeless crisis, we have so many people that don't have a home. Well, the problem is that those people are homeless because 9 times out of 10 they wanted to be in recent years. I will fight people up and down the block that tell me that homeless people are homeless because they couldn't control it. That's bullshit. You and I both know this. And they're trying to say that this bill was to help lower income families and try and help the homeless issue, when the fact is no one's going to be able to afford it, because now we're going to sit here, and once these properties are sold and they're in the investors' hands and they're the ones in control of the properties, well, they aren't going to get rid of these properties. And so what they're going to do is that they're going to rent them out to a tenant lease basis, and it's going to cause rents to go up even higher. The goal of the people in power is they want high density. They do not want private ownership. They do not want you to have space between you and your neighbor. There was a point in this video where he talks about how, they're going to build a 2-story ADU in the backyard, and how these people can look into the next lot's yard. It basically removes the aspect of privacy. And in no sense, when they wrote this bill, did they include privacy and property rights. Because in California, well, we call it California for a reason. And this is why. Because now they're taking away private home ownership to an extent. And they're incentivizing people to, be like China, be like Japan, do all this high density housing where no one owns any bit of their own property, but rather investment conglomerates or the government owns these properties, owns the land. And so this is just ridiculous. So here, I'm going to play it. I'm going to go use the restroom. I'll be right back.
SB9 and SB10 to help alleviate the housing crisis. If you add more units, in the short run, rents will come down a bit until they all get filled. And once they get filled, then rents start moving up. But home ownership is going to get wiped down. My guest today is Jim Brickheimer, former mayor of Costa Mesa, California. Today, he will explain the details of SB9 and SB10 and the impact of these two bills. And we're getting a situation where average everyday people are competing to buy a home against the corporation who's going to rent it out. And we end up getting a situation where people become renters their whole life. They don't get to own anything. I'm Siamai Karami. Welcome to California Insider. Jim, it's great to have you back on. Welcome.
Great to be here again.
So Jim, there's a law that has passed in California, and there's a couple of them, SB9 and SB10. It's become controversial. We actually
are short of real estate, according to certain reports.
Housing.
We have a housing crisis.
Right.
And we are trying to solve this with these laws. Can you tell us what these laws are about?
Well, SB9 and SB10. SB9, once you go through it, is quite frankly the destruction of suburbia in California. It's the absolute destruction of it. What it basically says is if you live in an R1 neighborhood, R1 is what we call single-family residence.
Yep.
We have a single house with a double-car garage. A lot of people here in California grew up in those houses. All through Orange County, Northern California, you have R1. There is no longer R1 in California. No longer R1.
Yep.
All R1 lots in California now can have an additional 2 units put on the property in the backyard or whatever by right.
But let's talk about that. Okay, so now what they're saying is that if you live in a tract neighborhood, or you live in town and you have your lot and you have your single family house, they're saying that no longer is your property zoned as a single family residence. They're saying that now this is going to be multi-family zones. And what they aren't talking about in this is, how does this affect new tract housing? Okay, the way kind of building departments work and the state works in legislation when it comes to construction is that typically when a new code is passed, it is going to affect the next building cycle, which could start January 1st, or maybe a permitting cycle, right? Or an energy cycle. Well, if you have a tract development that's being built right now, like actively, they've broken ground, they're building houses, things like that, they will be affected by this, because what's going to happen is that after the tract is complete, they are going to go ahead and probably rezone the lots to where they can handle that, or they built them in such a way where there's zero clearance lots, essentially, which is you have 10 feet between the roof eave of one house to the roof eave of the next, and you have a fence down the middle. So basically just a little walkway on either side of the fence, and then the house on each side. Those properties I don't think will be as affected, just because there's no room to build when they build these homes and they take up basically the entire lot. Then you really can't do much with that. But when we're looking at this is going to affect future. So for instance, you may have a tract development that's being built now, but how does that affect the future tracts? I mean, say you had a tract that a developer was wanting to build, and he's been trying to get it passed through the city ordinances, or the state ordinances, or county ordinances, right? But he hasn't gotten his permitting or approval. Well, I see this as this is going to stop any future construction of tract housing, neighborhoods as we call it. I think what's going to end up happening is that they're going to move to zero clearance lots for single family homes, and that is going to increase density, living density within the tract and within any given area that they're building in. And I think what's going to end up happening is that the traditional single family home that you would buy in a tract neighborhood anymore is going to go away. I think that they're going to end tracts. They're not going to continue them anymore, and they're going to move towards multifamily and high density housing. So let's continue here.
Meaning that if you live in your normal neighborhood, suburban neighborhood, and your next door neighbor says, I want to put 2 more apartments in my backyard, they can do it, and the city can't do anything about it. There's basic standards, but they can't do anything about it. On top of it all, they have standards that say you don't even have to add any more parking for 2 more apartments, depending on where you're located in a town or a city, if you're by transit or if you're considered infill projects, certain things like that. So the impact it's going to have on neighborhoods, R1 neighborhoods throughout California, is going to be absolutely dramatic. And if you look at all the players out of San Francisco, Los Angeles,
they're fine about suburbia being gone. They think suburbia is the most evil thing in the world to have people drive into town, drive into the city. They want to get people on the mass transit. They don't want you to be on a single-family lot. That's a waste of resources and land and space. They want to pack as many people as they can. And so now with SB9 especially, you're already seeing ads on TV because they're called auxiliary dwelling units. It's an apartment, but there are companies, construction companies, that will go ahead and finance it and put 2 more apartments in your backyard.
So according to some studies that was done by UCLA and UC Berkeley, the idea that people are saying that there's these 7.5 million homes, lots that are available for single-family lots, and they're going to, and not all of them are feasible for this kind of split, and there's only a very small percentage of them that would be a fit, only 400,000 homes that could go through this process. And not everybody will do it because they put some limitations. There are some limitations, right?
Well, so at the end, what they did is the limitation was it said that you have to sign an affidavit that says you will live in the property for at least 3 years. Okay? Now, they don't tell you what happens if you move out. They're not going to tear down the house. But what they're trying to do is do a slowdown so that small-time real estate developers, like myself, when I was younger, that's the first thing I'd do. I'd go buy a single-family house. I'd add 2 apartments in the back. I'd make a few $100,000. I'd sell it to an investor. I mean, it's any area that rezones to allow 3 units on a single-family lot. The values go up with the property. In fact, the houses become more out of reach because now they're going to be bought by investors, not homeowners.
Like I was saying, so they're going to remove the middle class out of it because the middle class is really just the lower class, just a little bit better nowadays. You know, God, I heard this great quote, and, you know, I don't know if any of y'all know this guy, Andrew Tate. You know, he's kind of a big deal online now, but I was watching some of the older videos, gosh, you know, a year or 2 ago when, you know, he was doing them, and, you know, he was right in the sense that he had a phrase, it's going to be the have-yots and have-nots, and that is essentially what, you know, we've been kind of going over as far as the kind of theme in all this today. We're looking at these elites, you know, the folks who are making the rules, the folks who have the most money to influence the rules, all these different folks in that stratosphere. They are going to make it to where you, I, even this mayor here, the mayor on the screen, right? Even he doesn't have enough money. He's just a local official at this point, which as a mayor, he'll be elected out at some point and it'll change again. He's not like Klaus Schwab where he can go and talk to some of the richest and wealthiest people in the globe. He's just sitting here with, you know, a reporter kind of talking about what California in their own legislation is doing. So, I mean, this is all tied together. So now they don't want you to have space. They want high density housing. They don't want you to have a gas stove. And these same people want to apply environmental scores to each individual person and their home, most likely, to be able to say, you deserve to go out an hour a week, or you're allowed to eat this type of food because you've been good. You know, all it is that these are mechanisms of control, you know. So we'll continue here.
But, you know, basically, you know, they slowed it down a bit by saying you at least got to sign, so a developer doesn't come in and buy 5 houses in a row in a neighborhood. He can't go into a city and sign a statement saying I'm living in all 5 houses. Clearly, he or she's not. But that's like a speed bump. In the city of Costa Mesa, where I was mayor, this issue came to us 4 or 5 years ago. They called them granny flats. Still the same thing, auxiliary dwelling units. And the state said that by right, people could put these in, but they allowed the city to say, hey, give us some requirements. And so one of the requirements that I said was, hey, the lot has to be of a certain size. And so instead of I think I did an 8,000 or 8,500 square foot lot. So it's a decent size lot, number one. And number two, I required you to park for that unit on the property. So one of the things that we have in California, and it's an anomaly in other places in the country, but mostly in California, is we have 2-car garages where we put $150,000 or $100,000 a car.
All right, hold on. Let me kind of cue this up a bit better. Let's talk about density. Add to stream.
So are you saying that this law is intending to bring density into neighborhoods that we have instead of developing new ones?
Exactly. So what it does, it's
It's
already
all
there.
about
It's
density.
already considered infill. How many units can we get? I mean, if you add more units, you know, in the short run, rents will come down a bit. I mean, there's more units. Now, not necessarily those places, because they'll be brand new and nice, so they'll go for top rent.
Right.
But other places will until they all get filled. And once they get filled, then rents start moving up. But home ownership is going to get wiped down. Because these neighborhoods, once it starts in these neighborhoods, everybody who buys a house there doesn't buy it for the single family 1,500 square foot house anymore. They'll all pay a premium because they can put 2 more apartments in the back. And that's a massive, that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional value. So then who ends up buying these houses? Investors buy these houses. Right. And one of the biggest problems we have in America right now is large billion-dollar corporations buying up houses throughout America and just renting them out. We're in a situation where average everyday people are competing to buy a home against a corporation who's going to rent it out. And we end up getting a situation where people become renters their whole life. They don't get to own anything because they're being bought up by, you know, Blackstone or, big Wall Street firms that are spending billions of dollars to do, you know, rental, single family home neighborhoods.
Now, do you think California will change 10, 15 years from now as a result of this law?
Yeah, well, the communities will change, clearly. The densities will change. Areas will become more like apartment areas. And there's nothing wrong with apartment areas as such, but there's a distinction between people that own a home and how they treat it, and people in general, not everybody, but in general, if it's a rental, it's just a different come from. You're there short term. It's like how you treat a rental car is different than you might treat your own car. You don't take a rental car to get car washed, right? It's just like, hey, you turn it back in again. It's not to say good or bad. It's just human nature that if a community has more tenants in a community, you'll have different politics. You'll have different attitudes about different things. And so it just changes the community. Now, is that good or bad? People like myself would say it's bad because the government forced it to everybody and the local community wasn't able to decide. I have no problem with people adding density, but the local community should decide that, not have some
and
other
they aren't allowing the local community to decide that. So, all right, now we're going to move on here. And I want to get to one other thing today. Now, this is a little bit off topic, I would say, but it very well correlates with the Great Reset. So, what they want to do in the grand scheme of things is it's population density, regulation over the individual sovereign citizen, as well as control over resources and money and control of that money. So in this next video, we're going to look at Project Cedar. Now, that's from the U.S. government. This was in Breitbart the last couple days, and I thought it was kind of a good add-on for this, because what I think that we're going to end up seeing is that ever since the innovation of cryptocurrencies, which I think are a needed benefit, what is going to happen is that now that technology is available to the masses, governments always have to put their fucking grimy little fingers into that shit. Which, what that means typically is like, take automobiles, right? Well, you know, someone made a car, someone else made a car eventually, and now the government stepped in and said, well, now we are going to tell you how to make that car. Well, it's kind of the same thing with cryptocurrency, only now we have this next step. Instead of just the government telling us how a car should be made and what's allowed to be sold, they're going to fucking make their own. So now, with Project Cedar, what we see is that it's wholesale central bank digital currency. And they're calling it a prototype right now. But prototypes don't last long when it comes to the government. You know, they're usually pretty ready with rolling it out. And what it is that, you know, typically when you send money, you wire money, okay? We use Venmo now, but there used to be this shit called Western Union back in the day. I don't know how old you guys are or if you guys even remember that. But you would wire money to someone or some organization, right? And then what would happen is that you would give account details, things like that, totals, and it would take, 2 to 5 days or, depending on where you were, to fund that money or to have that wire transfer complete. Well, when it comes to the big banks, well, they're sending hundreds of thousands of billions, of dollars a day. And so the way it works now currently is that when a large bank sends a large amount to another central bank, well, that takes a couple days for it to clear, for all the transactions to clear, all the account information, things like that, just for the money to arrive. And what they're doing with Project Cedar is that they are speeding up that process. So what they've done is that now that cryptocurrency as a whole does have value now. It wasn't just made out of thin air. People are adopting it. People are seeing the utility behind it, and they're seeing how these things all work together. Well, now the banking system, who was trying to discredit this technology for so long, is now playing with it. And when they play with it, they come up with this kind of shit, which is the wholesale central bank digital currency, a CBDC. And what they're going to do is that what they're doing is that they're saying, like, one of these coin is $1. So now that this coin has a value of $1, we're going to ship that coin, send it digitally over the blockchain to this other bank. Now that bank has effectively gotten the value of that $1. Okay, well, this is like printing money all over again. This is the feds printing more money, which means that we go into more debt and our dollar is worth less, which means in turn, eventually, it's going to either devalue the crypto market or they are going to devalue our country's currency or your country's currency, right? So say now they make a crypto coin that has the value of $1. Well, now that dollar doesn't have as much because say they printed a few billion coins, okay, and you have a few billion in circulation. Well, you had originally this, now you have this, so now it's been diluted by half, and so everything starts going down from there. And I think that that's what we're going to see here in the future with this kind of stuff. So I'm going to let this play for a minute. It's about a 3.5 minute video, but it's just an overview of what the central banks are looking to do. Oh, shit. There we go.
Cross-border wholesale payments are financial transactions conducted between central banks, private sector banks, corporations, and other institutions. Foreign exchange spot trades are among the most common cross-border wholesale transactions. These transactions are conducted bilaterally between central banks and private sector financial institutions, as well as multilaterally between various counterparties. The foreign exchange market is the largest wholesale market in the world, with over $7 trillion in daily turnover.
They're moving $7 trillion a day.
Safe, fast,
holy shit,
low-cost, transparent, and accessible wholesale cross-border transactions is critical to the functioning of the global economy. Currently, cross-border transactions function well, but there are opportunities for improvement. Today, most foreign exchange transactions take 2 days to settle. During this period, payment senders and recipients are exposed to settlement, counterparty, and credit risk, which, among other things, can hinder an institution's ability to readily access liquidity. Project Cedar, the inaugural experiment from the New York Fed's New York Innovation Center, explores ways to improve cross-border wholesale payments using distributed ledger technology, specifically blockchain. In a simulated foreign exchange spot transaction, Project Cedar introduced a wholesale central bank digital currency prototype to test whether using blockchain technology would improve speed, cost, and access to cross-border wholesale payments. The Project Cedar experiment revealed 3 key findings that show cross-border payments supported by blockchain technology can deliver faster, simultaneous, and safer payment settlement. First, faster, instantaneous payments by settling transactions in under 15 seconds in most cases, a vast improvement from the current typical 2-day settlement period. Second, reduced.
So, like I was saying, it's going to use the blockchain, and the whole point is that instead of having a couple days to move the money, they want to now do it instantaneous, which, you know, I get it. I mean, it improves efficiency, and you would think that it would actually bring value to the currencies, because now it doesn't take as much to move and produce. However, I don't know. I can see some nefarious activity potentially occurring as a result of these things. But I do see the good. So we'll continue.
To counterparty settlement risk by supporting simultaneous or atomic transaction settlement for payment senders and receivers alike. Third, more safe, transparent, and flexible transactions accessible to a wider range of financial institutions by enabling availability of payments on a 24/7 365 basis and increasing interoperability between multiple ledgers using the same technology stack and representing different currencies, private sector banks, and central banks. Project Cedar demonstrates the potential of distributed ledger technology to improve the safety, speed, and accessibility of wholesale cross-border payments. Visit the New York Innovation Center website to learn more about Project Cedar and how we are supporting central bank innovation.
Project Cedar aims to contribute to a broad, transparent public dialogue about the CBDC from a technical perspective. This video and the accompanying reports are not intended to advance any specific policy outcome, nor to signal the Federal Reserve or that the Federal Reserve will make any imminent decisions about the appropriateness of issuing a retail or wholesale CBDC, nor to offer an indication on how one would necessarily be designed. Right, so they got to say that, but if you read that, to me, if you do it's like the counter Kramer thing, where the opposite of what Kramer says, you'll make money on CNBC. You know, same thing for the government. So if the government's telling you that they are not intended to advance policy outcome, or that the Fed is going to be making any imminent decision on this, on retail or wholesale, I think they have that information. I think that they've already made the decision, and I think that they are just working on the policy to govern it. And so we will, I'm sure, see in the next year or two all this information come out, and hopefully for you guys, I'll be here to help you understand. So with this, I think we've gone over quite a bit of information today, and I think that we can look at this, these different topics and these different issues, and we can start kind of connecting the dots to see what is going to come, and hopefully we can start kind of building a timeline onto which these things are going to happen. Now, I can tell you that there's a very common year that a lot of these policies and a lot of these people are trying to hit, and that is between 2030 and 2035. So basically what they're telling us is that by that time they expect to have all these regulations rolled out and all this stuff in place and all this in motion, and basically have been adapted to it, or at least that'll be the final step. So right now we've got between 7 and 12 years before we really see what the final product is. In the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to see a lot of things roll out, and we're going to see a lot of changes, I think, locally, statewide, nationwide, and then between the different countries in the world and the different continents. So from here, I hope that this has encouraged you guys to do some more research on your own, and helps you think about these things in a little different light than what you've been told by these public institutions. Because I think people need to be sharing this information, and we shouldn't be, looking at someone who has a counter idea to what these mainstream folks are telling you and say that they're crazy, this or that. I mean, I'm more libertarian at heart, so for me, it's, your freedom is freedom, and as long as you are not harming yourself or others in the sense that, you're not imposing yourself on others if they don't want to be imposed upon, or, government needs to stay out of our personal lives, how we decide to raise our families and conduct our personal business, as long as it's for the greater good in a lot of ways, and that we can maintain balance, then I don't see a problem with it. If someone wants to do meth and burn themselves out, well, that's fine, as long as they don't hurt anyone. As soon as they hurt someone, or as soon as it becomes a potential problem for that, then it needs to be dealt with. But if someone wants to grow a special herb that maybe is found in China, and they have found healing benefits from it, but yet our country wants to say, no, you can't have it here, I don't necessarily agree with that in all cases. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of nuance when it comes to societal governance and regulation as a whole when it comes to the general population. So, these are just things we can talk about. These are things that, if you guys have ideas, or maybe I come up with something new, or you guys see something else, let's talk about it. Let's bring it up for discussion. The great thing about this new channel is that it's going to be kind of a catch-all channel. We're not just going to be talking about conspiracy theories or, the dark side of different aspects. We're going to talk whatever, so when I decide on what the next topic is, I'll be sure I'm going to let you guys know, and we'll get it on, and we'll have some fun. All right, guys. Well, from here, thank you. If you guys end up watching this ever in its entirety, thank you for watching. And fucking computer. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your support. You guys have a good one, and I will catch you on the next one.